Welcome to Rise and Thrive, Conversations for Greatness. We bring you captivating conversations with extraordinary individuals who have conquered challenges, achieved greatness, and are making a positive impact in the world. This is your go-to source for inspiration and motivation. I'm your host, John Merkers. Rise and Thrivers, please welcome an inspiring guest to the show. She's passionate about cultivating greatness in individuals and teams, perfect for this show. An elite triathlete with top 10 finishes in Rimini in Italy. She loved the challenge and satisfaction of mastering the three disciplines involved with being a triathlete, that is. That's swimming, cycling and running. I imagine there's a bit of mindset work in there as well. And then towards the end of her sporting career, started coaching and discovered that helping others to be their best was when she was actually at her best. An amazing rich corporate background with 12 years at Deloitte, finishing there as the Director of Human Capital Consulting, has a profound understanding of organisational dynamics. Her academic achievements include a Bachelor of Commerce and a field of study in human resources, organisational development and philosophy. She's now the co-founder of a marvellous organisation called Structured Creative. She leads a team there that uses structured problem solving, design thinking, and neuroscience to transform businesses and individuals. She's the creator of the Body Brain Reset, showcasing her commitment to pioneering new paths in business. Join us as we explore insights on leadership, teamwork, and greatness, of course. Welcome, Katie O'Keefe.
Thank you, John. That's quite the intro. I'm impressed. There's some good research in there with knowing my Rimini finishes. Wow.
I did look up all your results and I thought they were outstanding, but I wanted to touch on that one. Even just reading that, then it makes me think, I really want to dive into all of that with you. So we're going to have a great chat and then we'll see where it leads us. If we don't get to everything, I'd love to have you back on the show. We can do a part 1 and part 2, but let's dive into it. I could have also said the mother of 3 children. So you've just packed a lot into your life. I would love to start asking you by saying, I'll get the question out there eventually. How do you define greatness and what does it mean to you personally?
It's such a good question. And it's so funny, John. You know, one of the reasons I reached out to you and was really attracted to this podcast that you're doing is because the way I introduce myself to people now when I'm in a situation where it's like, in the networking situation is I say, hi, I'm Katie and I help people be great. And people look at me and they go, oh, okay, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. And I help people be great in three different ways or in 3 different contexts. And I help people as individuals be great. How do we show up as our best selves every day? How do we be present with the people that we love? How do we be motivated and enthusiastic and curious? How do we make good decisions? How do we solve problems? How do we stay calm under pressure? All of those things that help us individually be at our best. And I say to people like, you know how it feels when you feel great. You know what that feels like. When you're talking to someone or you're in a meeting or you're on a stage or you're performing in some way and you just can feel your brain's working well. You feel that you're clear. You feel that you're present. There's no fog. There's no distractions. And you know what that feels like. And we also know how hard it is to tap into that consistently and regularly, every day, and it's for some people, it's so elusive. It's like, oh yeah, I remember what that feels like. I felt like that in 1974, So, and with all of the distractions going on in the world, all of the things the external pressures that filter in and make us feel depressed or sad or lonely or worried or scared or anxious. And, news feeds off that. News feeds off bad news. So how can we control the things that we can control and stay present in the moment and still feel and be great? Yeah. So there's an individual piece there. And then I also work and help people in the context of teams be great. And, it's really interesting that we can do all the things that we need to do for ourselves to be the best that we can be. And for most of us, we work, and for most of us, we work in the context of teams, which adds a whole new dynamic to being great. How do we actually be part of a team that's great? How do I contribute to that? And how does the team help me? So, how do we do that in a dynamic way? So, teams are complex. And then finally, we've got people in the context of organizations as a system. And I think we've all been in situations where individually we're doing all that we can for ourselves. We work in a team, which is a great team, and the system within which we work as an organization is pretty rubbish and really drags us down. And so, how do we understand, particularly as leaders of organizations, how do we create the context and the environmental conditions that enable people to thrive and be their best?
Thank you. There's so much to unpack there. You touched on so many parts of being human, and we all sometimes feel great. Sometimes we don't know why. Sometimes we do know why. We might have had some exercise and got some fresh air and go, I feel really great now. So I know why, because I actually made the time to do that. Sometimes you think, I'd like to feel great, but I don't know how, or I'm not going to, or I'm not motivated to. And that's exactly why we'd like to have people like you on the show. So people listening can get some information or understanding, or let's just feel great by listening at the very least, but also get some tips on how to be their best and how to be great. So it's absolutely perfect. So in that context, have you got some things you can share with us, so people that are feeling like they would like to be greater than what they are, or uplift themselves, what would your advice be to them?
So, and that's a great question, John, and it helps me then to kind of lead into, well, what is the neuroscience of this, and how does my background and my history, how has that informed where I've got to today around this? And so to kind of wind back a bit before I go into what are the tips, and hearing my story presented like that in the way you introduced me was really interesting. But I describe myself as a late starter in life because I didn't get into triathlon until I was in my early 20s. And I got into triathlon because I had been overseas in my university degree. I'd done a year at the University of Miami. And as
Wow.
you would expect, when you go away, you live a good life.
How long were you in Miami for?
So I was in Miami for a year. I did 2 semesters on exchange, which was we are so lucky in Australia to have affordable tertiary education. And through that exchange program, I got to go to a private university in the US that would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to. And I got to take a place at that university while still paying my fees here in Melbourne. And it's an exchange because someone from Miami then comes and takes a place at Melbourne.
Gotcha. Was it the University of Florida?
University of Miami.
Oh, right. Okay.
The Hurricanes. Canes. Kings.
Did you go to their sporting events there?
I certainly did.
Is it crazy, like you see?
It is a massive football school, the University of Miami. The Hurricanes are a big, big team and a very successful team, and it really is like you see on the movies. The football team on campus was, very present. And the games are amazing. The crowd's amazing. You've got the marching band, you've got the cheerleaders, you've got the students in the crowd, and we all got to, we get to use our student cards to just go into the games. So that was incredible.
Was that a big eye opener? It's coming from a university in Melbourne to then a big university over in the States, and it being a bit like in the movies, and just really, I was going to say hardcore, but you know what I mean. I love Americans because I love how they get excited and really get involved.
I think it's a good question, John. I hadn't really thought about it, but I think it met my expectations.
Right.
I think because you see it on the movies and you get a sense of how big and crazy and full on it is, and how the sport of the university is part of the university's identity. And so I think it really met my expectations in that regard. I think what kind of surprised me with American football is how long it takes to play 4 15-minute quarters. And so, like, half a game was really enough for me. I was like, this is enough.
Yep.
But what did really surprise me is how much I got into ice hockey. And
Right.
any Canadians listening will hate me saying ice hockey because I know it's just hockey, but I absolutely loved it as a sport. And actually, now in Melbourne, we go to the hockey at the Melbourne Icehouse Arena regularly during the winter season when it's on here.
Yep.
And now the women's as is about to start. We'll be going to the women's. My little boys are learning to ice skate. So yeah, so that's become part of our lives.
Wonderful. Now, was there any triathlons going on there that inspired you, or did that come a bit later?
So that came later. So what happened with the University of Miami thing? So I went over there. I had a year over there. The first 6 months, it was a great lifestyle living because I lived on campus. So in Australia, I lived at home, and home was like an hour from uni. I didn't drive, so I was relying on public transport. So I didn't really have that university life experience in Australia. And so when I went to Miami, I lived on campus, and the campuses over there are like a full experience. So we had an incredible, what they called a wellness center. And, for context, this is the early 90s. Wellness as a sort of industry wasn't even something that we talked about here in Australia. We would have called it a gym, but
Mm,
in Miami, it
mm,
was a wellness center. There was like just loads of access to everything on campus. So I really got into the campus lifestyle. I got into going to the gym. I started playing water polo, got onto the water polo team, was regularly going swimming, really got into that health and fitness lifestyle. And then in the second semester, I got glandular fever, which in America they call mono. So I got glandular fever, which then really meant I wound right back on all the sport and exercise. And on
yeah.
top of that, I was still living a partying lifestyle. I was still ordering cheese pizza at 2 a.m. and eating cheese pizza in my room. And so I actually ended up coming home really overweight and really quite unhappy in myself physically. And
Hmm.
then, and people I speak to who travel and travel extensively, it's such a common experience. You come home and you come back and you get back in touch with all your old friends and you start hanging out with all your old friends. But there's this real kind of discombobulation or this disconnect between I've been away and I've had this really transformative experience and I feel like a different person. And I'm coming back into this group of friends who I feel like hasn't moved. They're having the
Hmm.
same arguments, they're doing the same things. And I really felt socially, so I felt unhappy in myself physically, and socially, I just felt at sea. It wasn't that
Yeah,
I felt
right.
unhappy with my friends,
No.
something was off. So as
Yeah.
a result, I was drinking a lot, I was going out a lot, I was partying a lot. And I tell this story about the moment for me that was the catalyst for change was outside the Marquee nightclub in South Melbourne at about 3 a.m. on a Saturday morning, vomiting into a rubbish bin.
I think I know that
Right?
exact rubbish bin. I've had a dodgy hot dog out the front there at some ungodly hour in the morning. What, back in the day?
Uh,
Yeah.
So, classy, really classy, right? So I'm
Yeah.
like 22 and I'm vomiting, and it's it's seared into my memory visually, this
Mm,
experience of kind of looking
mm,
into this rubbish bin going, this is not me. And
yeah.
I am
Yeah.
not happy right now. And I remember I went home and I, woke up on Sunday morning and I was talking to my mum and I was like, I want to do a triathlon. And she said to me, I'm sick of you talking about wanting to do triathlons. Let's just pick one and we'll go and do one together.
How good that your mum was really firm on saying, let's take some action on this.
Yes.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
it.
And actually, in fairness, if she hadn't have, I don't know if I would have done it. It might have been something I just kept talking about. So we picked this triathlon. It was late November, early December, down at Barwon Heads in the open ocean. We got there. The surf was enormous. And the surf was so big they couldn't actually mark out a rectangular course. They had to do an out and back because when they put the boys out for a rectangular course, they kept washing in the waves. The ride was on these rough, bumpy roads, and lo and behold, the run was 5Ks on soft sand. So we couldn't really have picked anything much more hardcore to do as our first triathlon, but we both loved it and we both got absolutely hooked on it. And so, so I was 22, overweight, unfit, was almost last in the field in my first event, but so hooked on it. And I was like, right, this is the lifestyle shift that I need. I'm going to get back into swimming because I swam as a kid, and then I got a bike and started doing running, and found then over the course of a number of years, really competing as an age group athlete, I just got better and better and got more and more serious about it. And then eventually, kind of in my mid 20s, after 3 or 4 years of competing as an age grouper, I was like, I actually want to give this a proper go. I want to try and be an elite athlete. I want to go professional. So I did. I cut my work back to 3 days a week and shifted into full-time triathlon, which then gave me the opportunity to go to France. And I spent a summer racing in France with a club over there. And then, so, this is now kind of in my 30s, like late 20s, early 30s. Had a period of time where I was really injured and trying to rehab that injury, and realized really I'm too old and too slow and too injured to make a living out of this. It's time to grow up and get a real job. Which then led me to, well, what am I going to do? So this kind of is still the late start a bit, because by now I'm 30 and thinking, what am I going to do? And that took me to Deloitte, and starting at a career at Deloitte at a time when most career consultants have been in the firm for 7 or 8 years or more by that point. Yeah. So I was starting a career in my early 30s, not yet having had any children, with peers who were well and truly advanced in their career.
Yep.
And then not long after I joined Deloitte, got pregnant with my first child. And so then I was still kind of in a fledgling management consulting career and trying to be part-time with a child. So then fast forward a few years down the track to I'm 40, separated from my husband, got a new partner. We had 2 more kids very quickly in quick succession. And so, so I'm still starting in life. I'm still in my early 40s, and I've got 2 more kids, and we've got a house. We bought our first house together, in my early 40s. But all of those things add up to now being in my late 40s, really feeling like I've got this richness of experience, a life experience coupled with then formal learning and education.
Yeah.
That brings this package together. So as an athlete, I got really interested in how the neuroscience of the brain affects how we perform physically. So how we think affects how well we can perform in an event situation. And then as I joined Deloitte and got into the human capital team there and started doing more leadership development, I really started to appreciate how we use our bodies affects how well we think. And
absolutely. Can I ask you, just because it's not a term that I was familiar with, and there might be a few listeners out there the same, human capital management?
Oh, yes. So, yes. Yeah. So it's effectively the branch of consulting which is focused on people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Thanks for clarifying that.
And it's a terrible term, because when you think about it, human capital, capital is a financial term. Human capital basically kind of reduces humans down to a financial unit of contribution in an organization. So it's not a term I like very much.
I was going to ask you, when you first started there, you said, you might have been starting a little bit from behind because other people were there. But I put it to you, though, that other people hadn't been traveling the world. The amount of discipline involved to be a triathlete, and especially when you say, I want to, follow my dreams and go for this professionally, that is a massive amount of work, thinking, mindset, discipline, all the things that you would think an organisation would value.
Totally. And this is where now the Body Brain Reset program really enables me to bring all of that and package it up in a way that I can help people through the knowledge of the science and the living of the practices really be their best every day.
Great. And so the Body Brain Reset. So you've created that understanding that your physiology and your body helps with your mind and what you're thinking, what you're doing. And it might even be a little bit the other way as well, but I know it's a two-way street. But I only know that through my experience, and you kind of intuitively know it. But I know Anthony Robbins is big on that, using your physiology to put you in a state to be to be great. So
Mhm.
whether that's breathing, moving,
Mhm.
saying, yeah, it's showtime, going for it, whatever that it is. But I'm really interested in, so that was the journey to kind of create that
Mm.
program. So please now, are you able to tell us more about the details of it?
Yeah, totally. So this comes to your question
Awesome.
around what are the tips for people. So
Yeah.
we understand that we understand with physical athletes that they not only need to look after how they use their bodies and how they train physically, but they need to pay attention to then how they think. And so this is, the whole sports psychology and the whole industry that's built up around really helping athletes get the most out of their performance by controlling their mind and controlling what they think. A lovely, really simple tip, which comes from Ash Barty's mind performance coach, is instead of saying you've got to do something, you get to do something,
Right.
right?
That's an interesting lens on an activity, isn't it?
Isn't that lovely? So instead of
Yeah.
saying, I've got to take the kids to school today, I get to take the kids to school today. Instead of saying, I've got to go to the gym today, I get to go to the gym today.
That is amazing. I'm getting goosebumps, Katie. Thank you, because it plugs into that gratitude. And sometimes I even say to myself, if you feel like you're getting a bit negative or whatnot, it's like, well, hang on a minute, mate. You can actually stand up and walk over there, and you get to do that.
Hmm.
And then you start to do all the things around gratitude and think what you're grateful for.
Hmm.
But it implies the gratitude when you say, I get to do
Mm.
that, as in how not lucky, but how grateful, how wonderful that I'm able to do
That I'm
that.
able to do that. And isn't it
I love
just
it.
like, and it's so simple. It's changing one letter.
I thought that as well. It's just one letter and you're there.
One letter new there, got to get. So that's a really beautiful one. So we understand this idea that, how we use our minds affects, how we feel and affects how we perform physically. And that's for physical athletes. The way I talk about this then to people in business and people in particularly white collar kind of roles is we are cognitive athletes. So, as cognitive athletes, our performance, our success is driven by how well we think, how clearly we communicate, how
Mm.
effectively we can make decisions, how creatively we
Yes.
can solve problems, and how
Yep.
well we stay calm under pressure. So,
Yep.
all of those cognitive outcomes sit in the prefrontal cortex part of the brain, this front part of the brain behind your forehead, which is where all your higher order processing, all your cognitive thinking is done. What we don't appreciate is for cognitive athletes, the way in which we use our body are the primary drivers of performance. And so the ways in which we use our body, this is what we talk about, a brain body system. And for that
Mm.
brain body system to be optimized, it's driven by the foundational practices are how we move, how we eat, how we sleep, and how we breathe.
Gotcha.
So when I talk about this with people, the things that I encourage people to do and the things that the science says we need to do are the things that we already know we need to do, the things that we already know are good for us. I know exercise is good for me. I know I should eat well. I know I should drink more water. I know I should get better sleep. Um, you know, breath work maybe isn't something that we're quite so tuned into, but like I kind of had heard that I should be mindful and I should meditate and blah blah blah. So all these shoulds, and I love Tony Robbins says I should all over myself. That's one of his.
Excellent.
That's I just love that. I should all over myself.
Yeah, I love that too. And so you're talking about, so we know that,
We know that
and there's always this bridge between the
knowing and the
knowing and the
doing.
doing. Are you giving us the
They're
bridge?
giving the bridge. So one of the bridges is the why. So
Yep.
people kind of know they need to do these things, but what they don't necessarily appreciate in the why is how important it is for your cognitive function. And leaders that I work with, particularly senior leaders in organizations, they really value how well their brains work. So they spend time on trying to improve their brain function through things like mind puzzles, brain games,
Mm.
crosswords, challenging things that they know will enhance their cognitive function. But what they don't actually appreciate is if they're not eating well, moving well, sleeping well, or breathing well, all of that time spent on brain puzzles actually won't make any difference, because the brain works from basic to complex in that order. The basic part of the brain, which is the brain stem, is the part of the brain that's nourished by movement, nutrition, sleep, and the breath. And if that part of the brain isn't well nourished, then the energy that you have available is going to be directed into the body to deal with all of the stuff that's not going well in the body. And that energy isn't available to the brain. It isn't available to the prefrontal cortex. So there's actually a filter in the brainstem called the RAS. And you can think of that RAS as like a gatekeeper.
Mm-hmm.
And it filters, so all the information that comes into the brain must first pass through this filter. If the brain is in a state of alert or threat or stress, information coming into the brain will be processed in a way that responds to the threat, which means it directs energy away from the brain into the body to put us in a fight flight state.
Yep.
If we're in a relaxed state, then the information that comes in will move forward up to the brain and be processed in a more cognitive way. And so what people don't appreciate is being highly sedentary and not moving is incredibly stressful on the body. And so if we are not moving, the body is actually sending the brain signals of distress that then directs energy to dealing with that. If we're not eating well, the body can't process shitty food, and that crappy food puts the body in a state of stress and distress, and so the brain then directs energy to processing that food and dealing with the toxicity. If we're not sleeping well, we don't have the energy available, the body's under stress. And if we're not breathing well, again, a high breath that's shallow in the chest, that sort of breathing is the way we breathe when we feel stressed and anxious, when we're trying to run away from something, when we're feeling emotional and sad. And that kind of breathing sends the brain signals of distress. And so the brain directs energy to dealing with that.
So all those, I could almost see like they're pieces of a pie for the whole there, because when you get all those things right, all things are firing. I definitely have heard, and I know about in the nutritional factor where, people say, why are my hair, skin and nails, not looking very healthy and they're not eating very well, is because your body and brain is smart enough to go, well, I'm going to give all the major nutrients I can get to your vital organs, and I'm not worried about your hair or your skin or your nails, because I'm trying to keep your heart and your and the major things going. So I have heard that before. So I was kind of getting a little bit of what you were saying there about the nutritional side of things. And so that makes sense to get all of those things right. And does the program offer you ways to get that right? Is it a thing over time?
Yeah.
How can we get those things right?
So exactly. So the knowing doing gap, coming back to that, part of what's closing the knowing doing gap is having a better understanding of the why. So
that's right. Yes.
So one of the things I do in the program is I do little short bursts, 10 to 15 minutes at a time, of the theory, of the science that presents the why. So we do that. We then do 2 times a week, we do a guided movement session. And I use a particular movement method called GMB, which is animal-based movement, bears, monkeys, froggers, and crabs that move. Exactly right. So it's fun. It's playful, it's a bit silly, and it's deceptively really, really challenging. It moves our body through its full range of motion in the way that we're designed to move. So one of the things that's really interesting about this movement is when you start learning it and then you watch kids move, it's how kids move, and they do it without thinking about it. So it brings us back, and there's a whole kind of industry now around primal movement. So it's very much this primal kind of animal-based movement.
Yeah, right. First I've heard of it, but I love it. See, one of the barriers I think for people to moving and getting exercise is time. But then when you think about it, you've got to make the time. But also having to go somewhere to do the exercise, especially, we've all had gym memberships and keep paying and don't go. And there's been times where personally, I've been to the gym and I've loved it. And then because that particular time of life allowed that for me to go there 3 or 4 times a week, and I'm loving it. And then circumstances change and I can't get there. And then I've stopped doing the exercise. So you haven't told me this, but I would suspect that those movements you can do easily where
where
you're
you're at.
at.
And I do the program entirely online. So you don't have to go anywhere in the mornings when we do the sessions. We run the sessions from
Yep.
6:30 to 7:45. And in that
Yep.
session, we do 40 to 50 minutes of movement, we do 10 to 15 minutes of breath work, and then we do 10 to 15 minutes of theory 2 times a week. And it's at home, in the comfort of your own home. We have kids join in, we have dogs join in. and but you don't have to go anywhere, so the barrier to getting there and doing it is easy, and it also means I can work with people from all over the world, all over Australia and all over the world. So part of closing the knowing doing gap is the theory, part of closing the knowing doing gap is the movement practice, and then the other part of closing the knowing doing gap is each week in the program for the first 4 weeks we have a specific focus on either nutrition. And so in the week of nutrition, and this is where it's tailored to individual needs and goals, is you pick what you want to work on with your nutrition that week and you make a commitment to work on it. And then we check in at the
Mm-hmm.
start of the next week on how you went against the things you wanted to do. And then the next week we focus on sleep. And then the next week we focus on breath and so on. So for the first 4 weeks, we have an intentional weekly focus where,
Mm-hmm.
I get you to do things and you set things for yourself to do. We check in. And then in the second 4 weeks, and this is the other part of the closing the knowing doing gap, is the science around habit formation.
Yeah.
It's the magic window is about 8 weeks. It takes about 8 weeks to establish a habit. So
Great. It's interesting you say that because I don't know how long it takes, but I keep hearing this 21 days thing, and I think, I don't know. You think you need longer than that?
yeah, 21 days is a minimum. So
Yeah.
at a
Right.
minimum, it's
Okay.
21 days. In
Yep.
some cases, it can be up to 3 months. So there's other research that puts habit formation at 3 months. In my experience of running the program, the first 4 weeks for people, it's very guided. They're very much dependent on my accountability. And then the second 4 weeks, we shift the focus a little bit. And I say to people, what I've given you is a whole bunch of things for you to experiment with, for you to try out. Try it on for size, see what you think. Does it work? Does it make a difference? And then the second 4 weeks is you pick for you what you feel's made the biggest difference and maintain the practice. And so
Right.
by the time we get to the 8th week, the question for people is, how ready do you feel to go on your own from here? And for the most part, people feel very ready.
And if they still, I would imagine you've made such a big impact on their life. It's like when you have that kind of relationship with someone, you want to stay in contact. Is that something that's offered so they can get a bit of Katie loving when they need it?
Absolutely. So there's a couple of things there. On a Wednesday morning, I do a publicly available session, and it's just a week. I run it on a term. So people who finish the course, who want to continue doing some physical training with me, come on a Wednesday morning. And then
Mm-hmm.
we monitor we track progress in the program using an objective measure called heart rate variability. And heart rate variability is the space between your heartbeats. So if you think of, let's say you've got a heart rate of 60 beats per minute. In reality, the heart isn't beating one beat every second. There's a little bit of variability by milliseconds between each of those heartbeats.
Yeah, I'd imagine because there's a lot of factors about with your breathing, your movement, the whole thing. Yeah.
So, and more than that, actually, when we're in a really relaxed state, the body lets go of control and allows things to move at their own pace. And so in biological systems, variability is good. So the human is a biological system. So when we're measuring our heart rate variability, a higher heart rate variability is indicative of being in a healthier, more relaxed state. So
Right.
over the course of the
Right.
program, every morning people track their heart rate variability, or HRV, And over the course of the program, we track how that's changing, looking for a steadily increasing heart rate variability over time over the course of the 8 weeks. So at the end of the 8 weeks, what I make available to people is to continue tracking their heart rate variability, and I'll continue to monitor that in the dashboard system that I have access to. And what I'm able to do then, and it's really interesting, is I go in probably every month and I have a look at how it's tracking for people. And I send people a little note, like I'll send them a text message and say, oh, wow, your HRV is looking great. I hope you're feeling great. Or I'll send them a note and say, gee, your heart rate variability has been really decreasing over the last few weeks. Is everything okay? Do you want to have a
Right.
quick
So you've got
check-in?
access to that data.
If
You've got
if
access to that
if they give me permission to,
if
and
they
if they
let you.
want to
Yeah,
continue
of
with
course.
it.
Yeah.
But what's so interesting
Great.
is I can see people's lives in their data. And invariably, without fail, when I message someone and I say, your HRV's tracking down, is everything okay? Do you want to have a catch up? They'll message me back and they will say, oh my God, you won't believe what's going on for me at the moment. Yes, please, can we have a catch up? So I can see it, even though I don't know what's going on for them. And then I'll show them,
Yeah.
we'll sit down and I'll show them what I'm seeing in the data and they'll talk me through it. I've got a guy I'm coaching at the moment who's a cricket captain, and we were looking at his data yesterday, and he has this weekly trend. So cricket games on a Saturday. Here's this weekly trend of increasing heart rate variability Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Friday, then it drops a little bit because he starts thinking about the cricket game. Saturday, it drops a little bit more because that's the day of the game. And then Sunday is his lowest of the week because he's exhausted from the game and he's recovering. And then he starts the
Yeah.
next week again, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Decrease, decrease, decrease. So one of the things we're working with him on is how can he better manage the pressure and stress associated with each cricket game so that his
Yes.
system isn't so impacted every week in
Yeah.
this way.
Wonderful. And based on data, and I would imagine in some cases, maybe that particular person realizes that that's happening to them. Maybe they don't, because you're seeing the data to know that this is happening. And so that could be unconscious for someone to go, I don't know, I just kind of feel a bit stressed before the game and I'm a bit exhausted after the game.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you're basing it on data and you're doing a lot of research in this area as well.
So on that, one of the really interesting impacts from the program for people is this getting back in touch with our bodies and getting back in touch with this how we feel physically and in tune with that. And so one of the things that people repeatedly say through the program, the impact of monitoring their HRV every day has been this better awareness of subjectively how I'm feeling with objectively what state is my system in, and how do I use that new understanding to better set myself up in the day. So let's say, for example, I wake up and I'm feeling exhausted. I've got a lot going on. You know, it's the end of the year. There's end of year performance reviews for people. There's budgets to meet. There's Christmas parties. And I see this decrease in my heart rate variability. But I'm also a bit of an A-type personality, and I want to run marathons and I want to do triathlons and I want to go to the gym and I want to smash myself. What people say to me is, you've given me permission to rest. You've given me permission to be kind to myself and be gentle to myself. You know, you've helped me better understand that the way I live has real consequences on my system. And in understanding that, I can better manage my energy so that I'm more consistent. So we get back to this, how do I show up consistently as my best self with my best energy every day? So getting in touch with what's going on in my system and how that reflects in how I'm thinking and feeling is a big part of that.
Well, and just the power in the question as well. How do I do the things I need to do to show up as my best self every day? That's a question we could all be asking ourselves and doing something about.
Well, and it is, John, you know, it's move. Get outside in the fresh air and just move your body. It doesn't have to be hard exercise. It doesn't have to be strenuous exercise, but just move your body. And then once you're moving your body, move your body in as many different ways as you can. You know, challenge your body and mind in different ways. So move your body. Eat good food. Eat healthy, unprocessed food. Drink water. Get good sleep and be aware of your breath. And so when I say be aware of your breath, the first thing, and I love this question, and listeners
Mm.
can do this now with us, how do you know you're breathing?
Sorry. Well, I'm not dead, but
Where do you feel it?
how do,
How do you know you're breathing? And so there's this, go through this kind of checklist of, do I feel the breath coming into my nostrils? And there's a whole science around nasal breathing as well. So let's just tune into the nose. Do I feel the breath in my nostrils? Can I feel the breath going, through my sinus passages? Can I feel the breath going down the back of my throat? Can I feel the breath going down my windpipe? Can I feel the breath entering my chest cavity? Can I feel the breath entering and expanding my lower two ribs? Can I feel the breath going right down and making my diaphragm drop down towards my pelvis? Can I actually feel the breath in my back and feel it expanding my back in 3 dimensions? And then can I feel it coming back out again? Can I even imagine feeling my breath going into my big toe? Can I imagine feeling my breath going all the way into my little finger? Can I feel the breath going all the way up through the back of my head as it comes back out the nose? And so, where do you feel your breath? How do you know you're breathing? And even that exercise on its own will immediately make you feel more calm.
yeah, it does. Even just for those that aren't watching and just listening, Katie was doing that exercise with her eyes closed as explaining it. And I was doing it with you and thinking about the things that you were saying. And immediately after, I felt a bit, I could see, I feel a
Yeah,
shift.
yeah.
Yeah, just by doing that. It did occur to me as well, though, breathing is subconscious and probably for a good reason because we've got a lot of other things to do that our brain can't say, okay, take that breath in now take that breath out. I get why it's normally something that we don't focus on, but I also like what you're saying is there are times where you do want to focus on it
Mm-hmm.
and do it
Mm-hmm.
consciously.
So, because the breath is the gateway to life, and the breath is the gateway to mastering your stress response.
Gotcha.
Because of the unconscious nature of the breath, we unconsciously change our breath based on how we're feeling. So, when we feel stressed and anxious, the sympathetic nervous system kicks in to put us into a fight or flight state, to put us into a state to respond to whatever it is we need to respond to. Part of that response, and if you think about this in a physical level, if we've got to run away from something, if we actually have to flee or we have to fight, we will shift our breathing through to the mouth so we can, in the short term, get more oxygen in and become more activated to become stronger and faster. But if we breathe like that when we don't need to, which is actually how most people breathe. So most people breathe through their mouth in a shallow way. That is sending the brain a signal that I need to respond to something threatening or fearful. And so it makes
Yeah,
you
right.
feel stressed. And that's happening unconsciously. So if we can consciously shift our breathing to a breath that we would unconsciously do when we're relaxed, which is a nasal breath that comes low into the diaphragm, expands the rib cage, drops the diaphragm down and expands the belly and expands the ribs. That then sends the brain a signal of being relaxed and calm. So the breath becomes your first like hack, if you like,
Yeah.
into how do we feel better. So, right back to your question before of what are the things people can do. The first thing to do is to become aware of your breath and then
Yeah.
consciously slow your breathing down, make your breath lighter. I love this idea of if someone else was looking at you, they wouldn't be able to tell you're breathing. So make your breath really light, make it invisible, make it come down into the rib cage, feel those bottom two ribs expand, feel the diaphragm drop down. Slow down your exhale through the nose. Really make the exhale long and slow. And at any time in the day when you think to, notice your breath. How do I know I'm breathing? How am I breathing? And then consciously change the breath.
What a great tip that we can do anytime. In fact, I was doing deeper breathing while you were saying all that. It just has that impact on me straight away. Very easy access to change the way you feel and think by using your body, and
It's free.
consciously telling your brain, hey, yeah, well, that's free as well, which is
Mm-hmm.
great. And constantly and consciously telling your brain, hey, it's okay. I want to be in this state now. So I'm going to give you the signals so you can help me get into this state.
Exactly.
Love it.
Exactly.
Love it.
And now that I'm in this state, I have all this wonderful energy available to me to creatively solve problems and to make better decisions and to respond
Yep.
more thoughtfully in a situation, to be more present in the situation that I'm present in, to be more engaged, to be more enthused. Like all of these things happen just by slowing our breathing down.
So much to get from something so simple. And I love how simple it is. Sometimes we say it's not necessarily easy, some of these things, but they are simple. This one seems to be simple
So
and
simple.
easy.
So simple.
Yeah. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the food aspects as well, because you mentioned that and how important nutrition is. I think a lot of people know how they should eat, and a lot of people don't eat that way. So there's the difference between the knowing and the doing. I personally have been taking a fruit and vegetable supplement, the most researched food supplement in the world. And that has helped me bridge the gap between what I know that I should eat and what I do eat. Now, it doesn't mean that I can't up my game. It's just a bit of an insurance policy, let's say. So I know it's one thing that I struggle with as having a young family and being the food purchaser and preparation person in the house.
Yeah.
So I'm all up for anything you got for me, Katie. And I know you don't have a magic wand, but in the area of nutrition, how would you guide myself and the listeners in terms of making a difference or some things that we can do? Supplementation is great. What are some of the things that you might recommend or coach people in your program?
So, the funny thing, John, is it's all the things we already know. So it's more fresh fruit and vegetables in their whole state for the fiber that you get from that. The body doesn't actually digest fiber for energy. So fiber is really important because it helps you poo. It goes through the system and comes out. But because it's bulky, it makes us feel full, but we don't get calories from that for energy from the fiber itself. So biologically, from an evolutionary perspective, we're wired to want to consume about 2 kilograms of food a day, because under a traditional diet, about 2 kilograms of food is what we would have need for our energy requirements in terms of the calorie density of that food or the energy density of that food. Modern food, we only need to consume about 800 grams of food to get our energy requirements because the food is so much more energy dense. But we're still wired to want to consume about 2 kilos of food. So you can see there immediately, if we're consuming 2 kilograms of modern food, we're getting way more energy than we need. So we store that energy as fat. So if we go back to more hunter-gatherer, like more gatherer type foods, high fibrous, leafy vegetables, fruit in their whole state, it's that weightiness of food that's not overly energy dense, and so we feel more sated, like we feel like we're getting enough. So it's fruits and vegetables in their natural state, good lean proteins. If you eat meat, you don't have to eat meat. It certainly is easier to get your protein requirements through meat, but if you eat legumes and tofu and other types of high protein vegetables and non-animal sources, then that's fine. But if you're eating meats, good lean meat in its whole state, lots of water, avoiding processed foods, really interestingly eating less after dark. The body, what's really interesting is for the same food eaten in the day versus in the evening, in the day you will have less of an insulin response to exactly the same food than you will in the evening. When you have a higher insulin response to food, insulin kind of acts as a barrier between the energy that's in the food and your cells absorbing that energy. And so if your cells don't absorb that energy and use the energy, then you store the extra energy as fat. So that traditional Mediterranean diet of eating more in the day, breakfast or lunch is the biggest meal and a very, very light, if dinner at all, there
Yep.
is some research that really supports that now. And from
Yep.
a why perspective, there's so much more understanding now of the gut brain axis and the health of the gut microbiome. And so if you're eating good, healthy foods and you've got a good, healthy, happy gut, what we realize now is that a lot of our neuromodulators, like dopamine and oxytocin and serotonin, are produced in the gut, not the brain. And they're produced in the gut in response to good, healthy, happy food. So you've got this gut brain axis where you're getting bottom up messages from the gut to the brain around, oh, this is good, we're happy, we're healthy, this feels fantastic. And then you've
Mm.
also got top down messages that when we're stressed and anxious, that upsets the gut microbiome as well. And I was listening to a podcast recently, a Huberman Lab podcast, with a researcher out of Stanford who specializes in the gut microbiome. And one of the things he said, and I really love this, is the extent and the number of microbiota we have in the gut. So it's billions and billions and billions of live
Mm.
microorganisms in the gut. There are so many, and there's such a vast variety of microbiota in there that there are some people who are now characterizing the purpose of a human is to host a healthy gut microbiome.
That switches it around
Doesn't
a
it
bit, doesn't
totally?
it?
So our whole purpose, and
Yeah.
I love this because we kind of go, "What's my purpose in life? Why am I here?" It's like
You're
you're
already
doing
doing
it.
it. Yeah.
Just look after your gut, and you're living your purpose. And
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's just so cool.
Yeah. I think it's cool too. I think it's cool. Wow. So makes sense. Fresh fruit and veggies, lean meats, not heaps of anything. Stay off the sugars as much as you
Yep.
can. Try not to eat too much after dark, if anything. And isn't that interesting? Because as humans, that can be a really satisfying way to go. Or you think it's satisfying as you're putting food in your face after dark, but your body's not really liking it.
Yeah, and we don't
Um,
sleep well. I
yeah.
did this the other night. I was, up with my partner. It was a weekend evening. It was like 10 o'clock at night. We're watching movies and we're like, yeah, let's have some, M&Ms or whatever. Oh my God, I slept so badly. It was awful.
Yeah.
We just don't like it.
And the other thing about the nutrition, I think, is, and this is something that I struggle with because I'm a basic chef, let's say, former KFC chef, but
I
that's
was
a whole other
McDonald's. I
story.
worked at Macca's.
Many
Yeah.
years ago. Yeah, good. So it's the recipes. It's putting it all together that's quick and easy, and getting it sorted. So that's something that I need to work on, so I can get that done for myself and the
Yeah,
family.
one of the things that we've started doing with our kids, because my three kids, my two little ones are 7 and 8, my older one's 15. And with the two little ones, what we started doing is they come into the kitchen when it's dinner prep time and they chop up their own veggies for their own salad. And
Yeah.
what's really lovely about that is A, they're learning knife skills, B, they're actually quite helpful in the kitchen, and they love helping. So it's giving them this sense of purpose because they're being really helpful. They're
Love it.
eating the veggies as they go. So, like starting a meal with veggies immediately starts to make you feel fuller because you're putting that
Yep.
fiber in and it puts your body into a good state to then digest the rest of the food. So, they're eating their veggies as they start. And and it kind of takes the pressure off. Our weekday dinners are not that fancy. We don't, like it's really simple. They will have some grilled meat and some salad and some pasta or some rice, and we just don't worry too much about trying to get them to eat really exotic, high variety of different foods. As long as they're eating healthy, fresh foods and they're helping us prepare it, it just makes it so much easier. And then, for Danny and I, we'll put in a bit more effort to our own meals on the weekend and to the family meals on the weekend. But on a weekday, it's like, just keep it simple.
Yep. I like it. Great tips and tricks there. And I wanted to talk to you about sleep as well, because that was another factor. And I know myself that I don't operate as effectively as I'd like to when I haven't been sleeping well. And sometimes I know, sometimes I'll know, and then other times I'll go, I'm really tired And so I can be in bed at
Hmm.
9 o'clock some nights because I know I need this. And my mum used to say the hours before midnight you can count as double. I don't know if that's true or not, but it seemed to be, because the earlier I go to bed, the better I feel the
Yeah.
next day.
And look, it is interesting. And it's funny you say that because I did do a bit of reading up on that just a couple of weeks ago in response to a very similar conversation with someone like, oh, yeah, my mum always told me, or my grandma always told me the hours before midnight count for double. They don't. They're still they're still
Sorry, mum.
they're still hours of sleep, and it depends on your natural chronology. So for some people, and this is where we've got early birds and night owls. People who are
Mm,
early birds, yes, getting to bed early is going to be more important. People who are night owls, that early to bed is not quite so critical because your natural chronology might be to stay up later and wake up later. And being a night owl myself, my whole life I've fought this natural chronology. If I'm still up at 11 o'clock at night, I can be really productive and work really well and through till 2 a.m., but then I need to sleep until 10 or 11. The reality of the working world, being in the working world, is it's just not, you can't do it. Or,
mm, mm.
the nature of my work is I can't. I have to be up in the morning. So in that regard, it is really important for me to get to bed at 9:30 or before 10 because I'm up again before 6 because of the work I'm doing. But there isn't hours before midnight are not worth more than two. What is important is the overall duration and quality of your sleep. So in terms of getting
Yeah,
better quality sleep, everything affects everything. So in the army, for people who aren't sleeping well in the army, the first thing they get them to do is to take 10,000 steps a day. If you are exercising more, if you are moving more, if your
mm,
body is physically more tired, you will sleep better. If you are managing your stress well, you will have less sympathetic activation, you'll have more parasympathetic activation, and you'll stay asleep. So, for lots of people, what happens, and I hear this all the time, is I'm actually really good at falling asleep. I go to bed and my head hits the pillow and I'm asleep. Where I really struggle is staying asleep. I'll wake up at 3 a.m. and my mind is going and I can't get back to sleep. So I'm only getting probably
yeah,
4 or 5 good quality hours of sleep. And then once I'm awake, I can't get back to sleep. That is a classic sign of the emotional part of the brain just on alert all the time and not having the right strategies to get you back out of that stress response into a rest and digest state. So, again, this comes back to everything affects everything. If we're moving well, and we're physically tired, we're more likely then to stay asleep. If we're managing our stress through things like good mental practices, breath work practices, ironically enough, cold water, cold therapy will really make a difference there. The sorts of things that really help you to manage your stress will help you to stay asleep. Having a good routine around sleep, so not eating or drinking too close to bed, getting off your phone close to bed. The number of people I coach who are like, oh yeah, I have a TV in my room and I sit on my phone and I scroll my phone, or I'll have my laptop on my lap in bed. And it's just like, no, 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 no. Get all that shit out of your bedroom. The bedroom is a place for sleep. Make it a place of sanctity. Because if you associate bed with doing stuff, when you wake up at 3 a.m., your brain's in this state of, oh, what are we going to do now? Because bed is a place of doing stuff.
yeah, that makes total sense. That's also been the advice that my daughter's pediatrician got when she was having trouble sleeping, and talked about, devices, screens,
Hmm.
how often, when. And her advice, which we do now, is that an hour before bed, there's just absolutely
No
no
screen. And,
screen.
and actually, one of the really lovely things that lots of people who do my program do, because one of the requirements of the program is to do 10 minutes of breath work a day or 15 minutes of breath work a day. One of the things that lots of people do is they start doing their breath work with their kids as their kids go to bed at night. And
Yeah,
so,
right.
they'll put the breath pacer on, and it's a timed breath pacer of 4 seconds inhale, 6 seconds exhale. And there's plenty of these on YouTube. So you can, if you Google either coherence breathing or resonance frequency breathing, you'll find
Mm-hmm.
5 or 10 minute guided timers that you can just play. So you don't have to have any special equipment for it, and do it with your kids as your kids fall asleep. And your kids sleep better,
Mm-hmm.
which means you sleep better because you're less likely to be interrupted by them waking up. And
Yeah.
because your kids go to bed earlier, so the really nice thing about this, often our kids go to bed earlier than we do. So we do this lovely kind of 10-minute breath work practice as the kids are going to bed. All of a sudden, I feel more calm at the end of my day. And I'm less
Mm.
likely then to want to go and sit on my phone and scroll or have alcohol or have sweet food because we're in a more
Yeah.
relaxed state. So we're not being driven to these distractive behaviors that are also destructive because
Yeah.
I've calmed myself down at 8 o'clock at night as my kids are going to bed. So we do it with our
Yeah.
kids now. So we do 10 minutes of breath work with the kids as they're falling asleep. And lots of people who do my program do the same thing. And it's just lovely.
What's occurring to me is that it's easy to get caught up in life and just get bumped around and just follow your nose where you're going. And you don't just have a great, extraordinary life just by existing. You've really got to do some things to create that. And all the things you've spoken about are simple, they make sense. I love everything you've said about the program. Can anyone do the program? How can we get access to it? I'm sure you've sparked a lot of interest with what you've said, something we
Yeah.
all need. And of course, I'll have show notes to be able to contact you and the Structured Creative website and things like that. Is the
The
program for
program is
anyone?
absolutely for anyone. It's available to everyone. I do 4 intakes a year that go with the
Right.
school terms. So I do one starting in February, I do another one starting in April, I do another one starting in late July, early August, and then I do another one at the end of the year, which is the one I'm just wrapping up for people now. I offer when I do the program, so it's usually $3,000 per person, and I offer people a 20% discount to bring a friend because I really think there's a lot to be gained from that collective shared experience when you've got someone in your life that you either work with or live with and you do it together. So I offer people a 20% discount for bring a friend. What I'd like to offer to listeners on this program is that if you let me know you've heard about the program through this podcast, that 20% discount is available to you whether or not you bring a friend. So that's available.
Fantastic.
You can send me an inquiry directly through the website. We'll include a link there, but I'll also include my email address in the show notes, katie at
Yep.
structuredcreative.com.au, but you can reach out to me there. And if you jump onto the website and have a look, you'll see a lot more information about the tools that we use and the way the program runs for your pleasure.
Excellent. Excellent. Katie. I like to ask our guests a couple of things at the end, and we are getting towards the end, although it feels like it's just been 5 minutes and we could go
I
all
know we haven't
afternoon.
even talked about teams yet. I know
I
this is,
know. Maybe we'll have to come back again and we'll talk and we'll be
yeah,
specific on teams. Yeah, I like how it's been individual for
yeah.
the first part, and then we'll definitely talk about teams. What's a question you wish that I'd asked you that I hadn't?
Good question. So maybe actually it brings me to this idea of the context and the environment, and to kind of round out this idea of individual performance. And there's a really interesting, and I guess the question would be, and what role does the environment play for people in enabling them to be successful? And there's this beautiful series on Netflix
Mm.
called Live to 100. And it's a series that presents the research from a project called the Blue Zones. And the Blue Zones are places in the world where there's a disproportionate percentage of the population that live to 100, and they call it a blue zone. And what this particular American guy has done is gone around and studied these blue zones, looked at how people live in these blue zones, why do they live such high quality lives to 100. Now, unsurprisingly, in the context of my program, it is how they move, it's how they eat, it's their social connections in life, and kind of breath work, meditative practices, senses of spirituality, that sort of thing. So, lifestyle factors are what determine living to 100. But what they then wanted to do was go into the US and deliberately create blue zones. So they wanted to go into communities and try to recreate blue zones where people are living these really high quality lives late into life. The way that they did that was to bring the community together to change the environment. So rather than making it an individual intervention of how do we get people to move differently, eat differently, think differently, breathe differently. What they went into the communities is they said, how do we need to change the town so that people move better, eat better, and are more socially connected? So they did things like completely change town layouts by creating more footpaths, creating more open spaces, changing what supermarkets stocked in their shelves, getting vending machines out of school areas and public areas, creating situations in which communities would come together and celebrate things together. So this piece for individuals, and I work with people in the program on this as well, is that, we are working on you individually and your individual practices. And what do you need to change in your environment to make this sustainable?
We're almost finishing where we started because the context is decisive. So the context of your environment helps propel you to do the things that you need to do to
Live a great
life.
And so this becomes things like, in my household, how do we get the crappy food out of the house? How do we as a household move more together? How do we as a household get off our devices and hold each other to account to that? How do we make collective commitments? In my work environment, how do we change the way we engage together in the work environment? How do we normalize getting outside and moving? How do we hold each other to account in the work environment? So really thinking individually, and I think this is what I would like to leave people with, is not only thinking about what are the behaviors and practices I need to put into place for myself, but what are the things I need to change in my environment so it makes it easy for me to do that.
Love it. Love it. Katie O'Keefe, absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank God for you in the world and helping people be great. You've shown great discipline in your life, great mindset, great commitment to others. You've had an amazing journey. You've gone from triathlete to gone to an unhealthy lifestyle to, thank God you were spewing up in that, in that rubbish bin. Well, it's a bit of a breakdown for a breakthrough, right?
Totally.
So, yeah. And then from there, propelled you into understanding and know a lot about what we've talked about. Then you've had your corporate experience. Now you've put all that together and run an amazing program for individuals and organisations. I can't thank you enough for being on the show. Katie O'Keefe, thank you very much.
And thank you for having me, John. It's been such fun.
Another incredible episode of Rise and Thrive Conversations for Greatness. I hope this conversation has ignited a fire within you, inspiring you to take bold steps towards your own path of greatness. And guess what? The journey doesn't end here. There's so much more to explore, learn, and achieve. So if you're hungry for more insights, more inspiration, and more strategies to fuel your personal and professional greatness, get ready, because the next episode is just around the corner. Every Tuesday, to be precise, where we'll continue to unravel the secrets to unlocking your extraordinary potential. Don't miss out on the chance to keep rising and thriving with us. Hit the subscribe button and you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops. And remember, greatness is not a destination, it's a continuous journey, so let's embark on it together. Thank you so much for being part of the Rise and Thrive community. It means so much to me that you're listening. And my wish for you is that you get so much out of doing so. Keep reaching for the stars, keep pushing your boundaries, and keep embracing the challenges that come your way, because that's how we truly grow. Stay tuned, stay motivated, and get ready to rise and thrive. If you're finding value from our conversations, don't forget to share this podcast with your friends, family, and colleagues. Together we can create a ripple effect of positivity, optimism, and positive change. Keep shining brightly. Your greatness knows no bounds. And remember, be great and stay awesome.